Well, Laura, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
For those of you not on YouTube, I'm holding up a copy of your book. I see you have it behind you
I
as well.
actually have this giant poster that Simon Schuster made. It's like a cardboard cutout, and I'm using it to people who aren't watching to hide my messy bookshelf behind it. Honestly,
you're so funny. I was like, that is brilliant. I mean, talk about manifesting, visualizing. This cover is so beautiful. Who did the cover?
Simon Schuster did the cover. I love it. And if you look in the writing behind the words is actually from the Sun Does Shine book, which is
The Sun Does Shine. That was the Oprah book club book.
Yeah. So it's words from that book behind, which is, about an innocent man on death row for 30 years.
So just side note, I did a little research on him, and he's from Alabama. Is that right? Do I have that right? Yeah. And just 30 years on death row, feet away from the chamber. What do they call it? The anyway,
execution chamber. Yeah. Like, I mean, when he was first there it was only in the 80s when he went there, mid 80s, they were still using an electric chair, just like 50 feet away from him.
For the love of God, how terrifying. And then he was innocent, and then they release him, and no retribution pay. Is that right?
Yeah. Alabama, as far as I know, Alabama's never paid anyone. They have, like, in their state legislature, this is my understanding, it might not be accurate, but they have like a vote on it to pay him, and they have it capped at like $50,000 a year for wrongful imprisonment. But they just every session of the legislation, they just kick it over to the next year. So they never have to vote, never have to pay that way.
So they never have to pay.
Yeah. Never apologized, never paid.
The injustice burns my soul. And there was a lot of that in his story. I also felt some of that in your story. I was like, girl, you are more spiritually involved than I am. I don't know. I try to be good, but I read some things and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
But you can't, live in anger. What's that saying? Anger poisons the vessel that carries it, or something like that. Damages the vessel that carries it. So yeah, we can't do that. Can't live like that. But I'm so excited to talk about your book. I read it cover to cover in I think it was like 3 days I read it. I just couldn't put it down once I started. I mean, the stories were so visceral from the very beginning, with the insanity of the addiction. Girl, oh my gosh, the whole and I'm from, San Jose. So I know that area of my sister-in-law lives in Aptos. So I know that area really well.
Was she my neighbor?
No, God, I hope not. I can't imagine. No, she wasn't on a court. You were on a court, right?
Yeah. We cul-de-sac.
Cul-de-sac. Yeah. No, she was not. But I was like, holy hell. It felt like I could visualize the places you were going to, but just like that opening scene of, there's no electricity at the house. You're like hustling to try to get food and a place to stay while you figure things out. Oh my God. Tell me, can you kind of just walk us through that first story of like the insanity?
So it's a chapter called Staycation. I will tell you something about this chapter. So the chapter was not in my book proposal. It was not in my first draft. It was not in my second draft. 3 days before the book. So the book originally started with that sort of intro, first line is reading was my first addiction. Right. And then it went right to the day of my arrest. Right. So 3 days before the book was set to go into production, which means like it's final, it's going into copy editing and all of the stages of the second year of the publishing process. My editor, Eamon Dolan at Simon Schuster, called me and he said, we need a new chapter. And I was like, what? And he was like, we need a chapter of you committing your crimes. And I was like, no, because I kind of, the psychology of why I didn't include that, like where I started, I haven't really looked at, but I was like, okay. And so I wrote that chapter like in a Wednesday afternoon in like 3 hours and sent it to him. And by that time I'd worked with him, like I'd gotten his edit. So I knew, I'm a minimalist writer. So I tend not to do a lot of description naturally, and so, but I had, had such editing from him on the first draft that I knew kind of what I needed to do there. And so I was like, okay, where, like, it was this sort of year of criminal behavior. So what do I can't put a whole year in a chapter. And so I was like, well, the day before my arrest, when I'm checking into a hotel, pretending like I'm on staycation, right? Like, just completely fronting and pretending. And my whole life is spiraled out of control. And I know this, and I'm just, I'm using, stolen gift cards to check into the hotel and, pretend like everything's okay, and tell my son, Caden, who is almost 4, like, oh, it's fine. We're just, just having a little vacation, when really I had no electricity at home. I knew things were closing in on me, and it was just chaos.
I just felt the terror and the insanity and the whole, even when you were talking about oversharing with the guy that was checking you in.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, I'm saying too much, and then you can't help yourself, and you're just like giving him all these extra details that he doesn't need.
Yeah. And some of them were some of them weren't even true. I was just, you think you're such a great liar when you're in your addiction. Thought I was such a great liar, and really you're not,
Yeah. It's because we're high.
Yeah. Well, I tell this in the book. I don't even remember this part, but I was, I'd gotten really thin, so like from the neck down, I thought I looked great. And from the neck up, I looked gray and 85 years old. But I was like, I had a friend who was like, you look really thin. Like, what's going on? And I was like, oh, I read the book, The Secret, and I just manifested myself thin. It's amazing. The power of manifestation. You should try. Like, I thought this was a genius, believable lie.
Yeah. I don't think she bought it.
No.
It's funny how our perceptions are so skewed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We don't see reality when we're sort of in that state of mind, but that's
right.
why drugs are bad.
Right. It's not good.
There's a reason that they're illegal. Yeah. So that whole part of, and then your husband coming back with the heroin, and then just, oh, everything's going to be better now. Now I can handle life.
Yeah. Now I can fix things.
Now I can fix things now that you're not scared. Man, that was intense. So, but let's, what I'm really curious about, like this, the story is amazing. And I texted you and I was like, it's not long enough. Like I felt like I was like, and it wasn't like a criticism. It was like, oh, I want to hang out with you some more. Like, I need to hear more stories. These were so good. But you don't go into a lot of detail about like how you grew up. Like, I was kind of curious about your family of origin, and I don't want to, ask you to share anything you're not comfortable sharing, but I'm always curious about family of origin. Like, what did dad do? Do you have siblings? Was there trauma? It sounded like there was trauma the way you alluded to it, but what do you want to say about that part?
So I think it's really interesting because there's a whole component to that that's not in the book, because I was like, this is just going to be too unbelievable. But so I grew up on the East Coast, and a lot of addiction, alcoholism in my family, both. Okay. A lot of chaos, a lot of violence. My mom and my dad separated or divorced right when I was born. So I basically grew up without my dad. My mom had stepdad, series of boyfriends. But it was always just, kind of chaotic. And my refuge was reading, my imagination. And I would just sort of hide from the chaos in my room. I have a lot of periods of my childhood that are sort of blanked out. So I know about them from what other people have told me, and my sister, when I was 19, she was 21, she died in a drunk driving accident. And she was really a very severe alcoholic as a teenager. And then another brother who was a heroin addict and died of an overdose. And another brother who had some other issues. And so we're just not connected at all. So not great. But what I didn't put in the book is, like, 5 years ago, through a DNA test, I got an entirely new family. Like, my father's not my father. Two new brothers and a new sister, the exact mirror of the family I grew up with, that I always thought, like, I don't fit in here. I just felt isolated. So I got an entirely new family. And I couldn't put that in the book because I was just like, this is just too unbelievable right now. So maybe another book or another story. I don't know what, but Yeah.
That's interesting because at the end you do talk about a new family, and I thought you were referring to your husband and his kids and their whole family. And you were, and they are.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
But
wow,
but I got an entirely new family of origin. Like
of origin. Wow. Is your mother still alive?
no, she died in 2017.
Oh, okay.
And it was after she died, I was like, well, that's it. I have no more family. That I then got this whole new family.
Did you feel like her passing was sort of like permission to write the story? Did you have any reservation about telling her story before she passed away?
No, I don't think she was a factor in it. I just think I wasn't at a place yet to tell my story. She would have loved it. I mean, she would have loved this. She would have loved, they're turning into a TV series. She would have really loved that.
Oh my
Like
God.
she would have been thrilled. So if anything, I'm like, I wish she was here to just to see this fun.
I actually forgot. You did mention that, how you took care of your mom in the end. She got sick. And
yeah.
Dementia.
Yeah. She had Lewy body dementia, really severe.
Okay. All right.
Dementia that came on quickly and aggressively. And I didn't know at first what was going on, and I'm like trying to be logical with her. I was like, what do you mean the light switches don't work? Like, of course they do, like I didn't know.
Oh, right.
At first. So I was taking care of her, and she was, this really, really brilliant woman. And it just took her mind like that. So
how long from diagnosis to death? Was it years?
A year. Yeah. I mean, about 2 years total that something was going on. And then about a year from diagnosis to when she passed away.
Yeah. That's rough.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like when you have a childhood where, like my mom just wasn't there, bottom line, like she wasn't there. I feel like I grew up alone, and then having to switch roles and be there for your parent in a way they were never there for you. You just kind of let all that stuff go, or you try to in that, in that moment. But it was it was hard. It was a hard death. Yeah,
that is hard. And that's a long stretch too.
Yeah.
My mom died. She got cancer, but she was only sick for 22 days. And it was emotionally, it was emotionally so draining, and just such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
To have like an extended period of a year or 2 years even.
Yeah.
That's a marathon.
Yeah. It was a crazy time because I was working full time. I was, collaboratively writing a lot of books. I'm running to her, take care of her like 8 times. Like it was it was chaotic. It was very chaotic.
I was so impressed when I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but when you were writing, like ghostwriting and doing like 5 books at a time, I was like, how do you even do that? That sounds really hard.
Yeah. I couldn't do that now, but I just don't work in that, like when I got out of jail, like when I first got the job at Idea Architects, like I really was trying to prove myself in so many ways to myself, to the community, to employers. And so I worked in a way that was not really good for me. Like, now I'm all about getting my 8 hours of sleep, right? Like,
right. You were talking about pulling all-nighters and stuff.
Yeah, I would pull all-nighters. I would, just get up at 4 to work.
Yeah.
And so just kind of crazy.
It feels like in that beginning period where it's like you have all this energy of like negative energy, like all this fear driving you. Like I think of it as like a dirty fuel source, because you can't really, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
But man, it's like shadow work, right? It's like sometimes it allows you to be productive in ways that you otherwise couldn't be.
Yeah. I think I'm really great in a crisis. Right.
Yeah.
And the trick is to learn how to be great, not in a crisis. Like that's what I'm learning. Like, how am I just as like on when it's like a nice, peaceful day? Like that's just been a learning curve for me, honestly.
Yeah, like tapping in and channeling.
And just not having that fight or flight energy, that like survival energy all the time.
Yeah, that is brutal. Let's talk a little bit about, so in the beginning of the book, you talk about some of the crimes that you did, and then getting caught, and just, man, I just felt the cruelty of the people arresting you, and just the people in the process that were sort of handling you and others like you.
Yeah.
You know, looking back on that experience, I don't know. It's like, do you hold any resentment towards any of those people? Or I mean, the injustice of, there were so many moments of injustice. I was like, how do you move forward without hanging on to those resentments?
Yeah. I don't have resentment. I wouldn't say I have resentments. And I spent so many years, like a good solid decade post that, in so much like shame and really not feeling like I could feel any injustice, right? Because that's not taking responsibility. That's not
Right.
taking accountability. Like, I did these bad things, like I deserved everything. I
Right.
think like when I was arrested, my youngest son was home, and I have that moment, which is like, that used to be the opening scene in the book. Now it's like chapter 3, I think.
Yeah.
But that moment like was so traumatic. And, and I know that now because I like really up until recently, I still like have constant dreams of it, constant like symbolic dreams of it, where like,
Right.
he's in the back of a car, or all my children, I can't get to the break, or it's always transportation related, like a train leaving and I'm like trying to get to them. It's just like
Yeah.
the sort of classic, as I learned, PTSD symptoms of that. But I was like I caused that. So how do I heal from, like, I didn't think I deserved to heal from something traumatic that I caused myself. Right. So that was like a big learning curve for me. Like I could have the luxury of needing to heal and the grace of healing. Like,
The grace of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think, I didn't have kids I had kids after I got sober, but I work with women who get sober after they have kids.
yeah.
And I find that is one of the biggest obstacles to overcome is mom guilt.
Yeah.
It's that
Yeah.
deep mom guilt. You're the
Yeah.
one and they rely on you so heavily,
Yeah.
right? Like you're their everything.
Yeah.
And then
And I
to be
mean,
the
you can have
person.
mom guilt just for like not doing organic baby food, right? So this is like mom guilt on steroids when you're or on drugs, right? Like,
Drugs, yeah.
but like that, but just in I don't have resentments. I wish, but I do wish that they had let me call a family member instead of Child Protective Services. Like I go back to that moment,
Yeah.
and that was a moment where there could have been some compassion,
Yeah.
some kindness, some grace,
For the
right?
baby, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah. And so like that, I wish that had been different, because that would have changed so many things, and now I can't, like, it's hard because you're like, well, now looking back, everything is okay. Everything happened the way it did. I'm happy with who I am and where I am and all of that.
Everything's okay now.
But it didn't need to be that way. Like when I was taken into the jail, the sheriff, and I was freaking out and wanting to know where my son was and who had taken him. And he hadn't spent a night away from me. And like, he's right at that stranger danger age, and like that attachment age. And I was freaking out and just like, where is he? Who has he? Where, like, what's happening? And he just, there's that, where he grabbed my arm kind of tight, and it was right in between the doors. And he was like, you shouldn't be anyone's mother. And it was
Brutal.
just like that, like stabbing. So like, there's moments like that. I don't resent them,
Battered.
but they wounded me in ways that took a really long time to heal from. And
Totally.
unnecessary. There's certain things, I think, like, how we approach people in the criminal justice system. I think it has to be with compassion and integrity, and like public humiliation, public shaming, piling it on, I don't think helps anybody rehabilitate if that's the goal.
No, I mean, in recovery, we talk about you can't hate yourself well. It's like you're not going to be shamed into acting better.
Yeah.
Right. All this stuff comes from. And I thought what was so interesting was sort of your what I really respected really was your mindset of, because you were like the exact opposite of your ex-husband, like the exact opposite of like a victim mentality. like you took on all the
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. And that sounded like it makes sense to me because when you have childhood trauma, severe neglect, we go into hyper independence. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you take on all the responsibility.
Yeah.
And when this thing happened, you took on all the responsibility.
Yeah.
And did you find later as you were healing and things that maybe you took on responsibility for things that weren't yours?
I mean, looking back now, I can say yes.
Yeah.
In general, like, I'd have to go back and think specifically, but I think that is my natural way of doing things, being hyper responsible,
Yeah.
and I can handle it all. I remember being I was like 12 years old and my family was in chaos, right? And this is one of my like few childhood memories but I was like 12 and there's chaos and fighting and all kinds. And I remember like, you know, praying. I was like, give me all of their pain. I can take it. Like I was like a little mini
Oh,
martyr in training,
yeah.
but I remember at that time, I was always really searching. Like I go with all my friends to their different religions, and I was like looking for meaning. But I remember like saying, give me all the pain. I can take it. And then later and much later in life, I was like, oh, I take that back. Like I didn't mean to make that deal, So I think that's my natural, that responsibility is kind of from childhood trauma and my natural state. And I have to
Yeah.
like, I still have to guard against doing that in,
Yeah.
in random things.
I know. That's like, it becomes our default.
Yeah.
Right. They say that there's always one person that does all the feelings in the family
Mm-hmm.
that tries to take it on, but we're just not
Yeah.
that powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then actually it's such a setup for failure, right? It's a setup for
Right.
failure because there's no way that we're going to have the power to be able to make everything right for everyone.
Right.
And then we just, it's one of those self-fulfilling prophecies and it's a spiral that continues to go down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's rough. Let's talk a little bit about, we talk about the dark places that our addiction takes us, and you're in jail. And I want to just read a little tiny bit. Your writing was so good. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to find some samples that were just so hard. By the way, you made me cry like multiple times in this book. I was, I think that's one of the things when they say that pain recognizes pain,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was really feeling it. Oh my gosh. So this is in the beginning when you first go and you're just taking on all the responsibility for everything, just the shame and the guilt. And so this is in the country music hell
Chapter.
so funny. It's like, what is that saying? That tragedy plus time equals comedy. It's like
Mm-hmm.
at the moment, at the time, that shit wasn't funny.
Right.
But yeah, it takes us to dark places. So you say, as I form my suicide plan, a peace washes over me. My mind stops racing. My nausea goes away. Even the chills and headache disappear. I float on a calm black lake of no thought. I mean, just the idea of anticipated relief.
Mm-hmm. Just
I
all
mean,
those detox symptoms went away, all the anxiety, everything.
so you were in the middle of detoxing from heroin. I understand that that's
Mm-hmm.
a really painful detox.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in the
Yeah.
middle of it, the idea of suicide brings you relief.
Yeah. And it wasn't, it's weird because I can remember it was just this, it was peace, but it was a dark peace. It was just like this
Yeah.
silent, it was like, okay, this is the answer, like this, I really believe that I had just failed at life, right? Just completely and utterly, like I gave it a shot and I failed. And at that time in that state, I didn't have that spark. Like even in the compulsivity of active heavy addiction where you're just compulsively finding and getting more and using it, like there's still that spark that keeps you going for each miserable day, right? Like and I was like, I don't have it in me. This was the one moment in my life with that hyper responsibility where I'm like, I don't have it in me to get through what's ahead of me. I can't do it. Like I can't see it. I can't do it. It was such a relief to just be like, I've just failed at life and there's no redemption for me.
No hope.
No hope, no redemption. I don't deserve a redemption arc to my story, right? Like,
Yeah.
that was like this thing. And I was just like, oh, it was so peaceful for that moment.
It almost sounded to me like it was something that you deserved, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was like that's what anyway, I don't mean to interpret your
Yeah.
experience, but it was like the relief that came with accepting total responsibility. Like, I am the bad person they say I am,
Right.
and I'm going to accept
Yeah.
my lot in life, which is that it's over.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
such a dark place.
Not to give the book away, but I failed. No.
Spoiler alert, here we
Spoiler
are.
alert, I'm here.
Still here. But
Spoiler alert, was wrong. Don't recommend.
Right.
Bad
Yes.
thinking.
0 out of 10 recommend. Yeah. No, it's like and that's the place that addiction takes us, right?
Mhm.
Is that dark place of surrender of like, there is no hope.
Right.
And so, what do you feel like, what was a turning point? I mean, you started to like make friends. You started
Yeah.
to learning the rules in jail. I was like, oh my God, the rules.
Yeah.
Like the first night when the girl asked you to open the door.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, she was, yeah. So the first night, because I hadn't been in jail. And so I go in there and there's no orientation. There's no like welcome brochure. There's no like list of amenities, like there's no binder.
no binder.
So I
No
was just
welcoming committee.
yeah, there's no, and so this
They just
girl,
throw you in there.
they do. And it was the middle of the night too. So I was like, where do I go? Do I snuggle with someone? Like, I don't know, like, what do I do? And so, and I was like freezing cold too. And so this woman was behind, there was a 2 tiers in G block, which is where I was, and kind of where your rooms with locked doors, right?
Okay.
And then there's what's called the freeway, which was a series of bunk beds. And those are kind of around the perimeter of the room. And there's like cafeteria tables in the middle. So everything's in this one room. And so a girl was yelling through her window, and she's like pointing down at my waist, kind of like, and I was like, what? Like, what? Like I didn't know. And so I went over and tried to open her door, which, as I say in the book, told everybody there everything they needed to know about me, as I had never been there before. Because basically she wanted to know if I had brought anything in, right? Like
okay.
if I brought drugs in, right?
That's why she's pointing
That's
to
what
your
it
waist,
was.
because that's where that's nature's purse, as we say.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nature's purse, when you would bring things in.
Yeah. And I'd had 4 children, so I had a purse.
A duffel bag.
Yeah. Like a tote. No.
A tote. Yes. A fancy tote.
So I didn't know. And then it was just like, everybody laughed. It was like a joke, because it was like, you can't unlock a locked door. I would have known that if I had any
if you had been there before.
Credibility. Yeah.
0 street cred, as we
0
find out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I thought it was so interesting. I don't know how much we want to talk, but I just have to say, I thought it was so interesting that you use your talent and skills. Oh my gosh, the Power of Now book.
Oh yeah.
Holy smokes. It's just like a series of things. How did you get the book? You have this writing ability. You start helping people. And then can you talk about the moment, the power of transfer, the transfer of power moment with Daddy?
Yeah.
That was cool.
So, so I will say, like in the country music hell chapter too, like the guards controlled the TV in the room from a kind of central hub outside. And as a punishment, they just played country music videos all day long. So like
they thought y'all hated it.
Yeah, I mean, but really it's like good stories. The cat, like I still know so many tunes, and I don't typically listen to country music, but I know all the songs from that era. But so like quickly you kind of learn there's a system, and who's in control. And if you're in the top tier up above, that's where the shot caller is. And there's a lot of there's a lot of people bored all day. Like the only thing you have, like jail time is the craziest time. Like today I woke up and this day is going to go by so fast. In a blink, it's going to be over. Yeah. But in jail, every day is like a year long. Like it's like a time warp. I can't even convey how weird jail time is. So people are bored and they're plotting things and, doing things to pass the boredom, pass the time. But So there was, so Daddy was basically the shot caller in G Block at that time. And Daddy had a little embarrassing moment, stumbled on the stairs and people laughed.
Right.
And, there was this sort of chaos. And there's another woman, Elena, and everyone was in chaos and yelling in it. So I kind of, I don't know where, if this is from The Power of Now or just had heard it in school or whatever it was, but I was like, telling Daddy, like, quiet power, real power is quiet power. And mostly I just wanted it to be quiet in there, and so it was like this sort of like, the more quiet you are, the more power you have. And so Daddy took this and, was giving Elena the silent treatment, which is through just staying silent all day. And it just threw
right next to her.
Yeah, it just threw everybody into chaos until eventually Elena rolled herself up, which is basically got herself taken out of G, which is a phrase. So, and that, because of that sort of help with Daddy, I got moved upstairs pretty quickly. So I got moved up into the top tier. So, yeah, that was
pretty cool. But then
yeah.
you became the shot. It sounds like, did you become the shot caller?
I mean,
kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I'm
kind
like,
of badass.
there's a woman, who was in jail at the same time as me when I was working on the book. I was like, so this is my impression, like I wanted to vet it because I was like, these women are gonna read the book and be like, she was a shot caller, but yeah. So I was like, this was my experience and what I'm remembering. So
well, I think I was the shot caller. Was
yeah.
I the shot caller?
Yeah. I was like, what was your experience of me? Because you just have you're in your own world and your own experience. But yeah, so it was really, like I say in the book, it wasn't like that different from PTA meetings, honestly.
People are people wherever you
go. Yeah.
Everyone's practicing image management and trying to gain power and control. And yeah. Brutal. Man. And so.
And I was also a lot older.
Oh, right. That's why they called you Mama.
Yeah. So Mama Love was my jail nickname. So that's the title, The Many Lives of Mama Love. And there's still, people who call me that all the time. And so my friend made me a little cap with it, but like some of the girls in there were 19, 20, my oldest son was 17 at the time. So like they weren't that much older than
babies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of those stories were so tragic. I think it was it Kiki? I don't remember who it was, but somebody had been gang raped and then, and then I don't even know, I forget how she ended up, but it was just like the injustice of these poor girls that are so vulnerable and yet nobody's looking out for them, and how they just get put into the system. And then once they're in the system, incredibly almost impossible to get out.
Yeah. And the truth is 80% of incarcerated women have children. 80%.
Yeah. And, oh my gosh. And the ones that were having babies in jail that immediately.
Yeah. Having babies in jail, having to go to, doctor's appointments, handcuffed to beds. Yeah, I had to go to one doctor's appointment outside of the jail, and it was just like mortifying. Like you're in your jail scrubs, you're handcuffed, you're sitting in the doctor's office, which is like where my kid's pediatrician was, and all these little kids are kind of looking at you, like it was just.
And you're with armed guards and stuff.
With an armed guard, it's just like mortifying. Like you're. I just think of that movie like Aircon, when they're like ushering and everyone on the plane is looking like it felt like that. But
oh my gosh, like you were under the magnifying glass, under the spotlight.
Yeah. And like you're this scary, dangerous person.
Right. And you're like, but that's not really who I am.
No.
Yeah, you're so sweet.
I'm so nice.
So nice. Let's talk a little bit about oh my gosh, let's talk your ex-husband's wife. It sounded like she was the leader of the witch hunt. Are y'all friends now? Friendly?
We're friendly.
Yeah.
She's I actually just saw her recently. She was out in California on the East Coast. I just saw her for a minute. And it was, we had a conversation about the book. She has not read it. And
is she going to?
Yeah, she's going to. And she asked about it. And I said, it's just so you know, like, I told the truth about how hard our relationship is, you know,
Yeah.
and I do. And, you know, I said, I wrote the Mother's Day scene is in there.
Ooh.
And she burst into tears. Right. And she
Which
said,
Mother's Day scene? The first one or the second one?
second one.
Oh, okay. Because the first Mother's Day, you're
In
in
jail.
jail.
I'm in jail on Mother's Day. Yeah. Talk
And the
about
kids
mom
come.
shame.
Oh
Your
my
kids having to
God.
visit you in jail. It was a hard day in jail.
It's brutal.
Mother's Day. But the second one, when I'm out of jail, and
you
and
go
she,
see her when she's
and
sad.
yeah. And you know, and I told her, I said, you know, I write in the book that, like, maybe you hated me, maybe you didn't hate me at all. And she was like, what she said to me, she said, no, I didn't hate you. I was just always jealous of you. And I was like, okay. But, you know, like, I think it's,
She was hard on you.
yeah, she was hard. And, you know, she had her reasons for judging me so hardly. And I'm also, you know, made her life, you know, it's complicated because I'm so grateful to her and my first ex-husband for taking in Caden.
Yeah.
Right. Because I don't know that I would have gotten through if that hadn't happened. Like, I don't know if I, you know,
I know.
I would have
You would have
been
stayed
able
in
to
that
go
dark
through it.
place.
Yeah, I would have stayed on that. I would have gone back to that lake of no thought or whatever. I was like, that's good. I wrote
darkness.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I
was like, that sounds good. I forgot about that
poetic
line.
turn of phrase.
Yeah. So I'm super grateful. And also she was really hard on me too. So it's tricky, you know.
It kind of sounded like she led the witch hunt. I mean, we were talking about the trial and everything that you went through. You know,
the
the
mob,
neighbors being so mad at you. I was a little surprised at how mad the neighbors were.
Yeah, the mob, you know, at the time of sentencing, who really wanted me to, you know, if I hadn't done the plea deal I'd done, I would have gone to prison for 27 years. I would have seen any of my children until they were like middle-aged men, right? Like,
yeah.
And that's hard to think, you know, like, I know that I hurt people and violated their trust, but you know, I've never had a violent moment in my life except for throwing a head of lettuce when I was 16, someone, you know, so like,
didn't seem like the punishment fit the crimes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so it was hard. It was really hard, and just people were angry. And I think, you know, that softens over time, but, and at the time I was so guilty and ashamed and wrong in my head that I didn't, like, it's hard to be like, wait, this is not right. This is not fair. You know, like, I was in no place. Yeah. And I think that's you know, one of those growing things too. Like, I'm great at advocating for other people, you know, like, even with books, I'm a literary agent. Like, I can hype up someone else's book, but you're like, wait, I have to promote my own book. What, you know? And so it's been a learning curve to, like, you know, and that's, I think, the journey of shame is, like, you can't advocate for yourself if you're experiencing shame. I can't advocate for myself if I'm in shame. I can't like say, you know what, this was actually too much, or this was harmful, or this, you know, like, whatever it is. So that's been, you know, like, took me far too long to get over that. Like, now I'm ashamed about how long it took me to heal from shame. I'll find anything to be ashamed about. No, but you know, it took what it took. But yeah, it took, you know, I wasted a lot of time, I think, you know.
Well, it was a lot of time spent in pain, you know, and it's so interesting, this idea of wasted time. I feel like it's only wasted if you don't get the lesson. Or, you know, that whole idea of taking your pain and transforming it into your message, which you've done beautifully. I mean, the book was so good. I was telling you it was too short because I wanted to hear more stories, and it sounds like we're going to get to hear more stories. If it's going to be a TV series, or
it's so I poured out all this pain and trauma in the book, and then the people in Hollywood were like, this is hilarious. So
you are hilarious. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I know you talked about crying, but I really do, like, I love in writing to make people feel in general, like, that's the goal. And then, you know, like, if I can make you laugh and cry, like, ideally in the same paragraph, then I feel like I'm doing my job. Right. That's my jam.
You did your job.
Yeah, so Scott Budnick and the production company One Community so Scott did all the Hangover movies, and he also did the movie Just Mercy. If you read the book Just Mercy with Brian Stevenson. But so I'm always like, if those two stories had a baby, that's my series. But because but yeah, it's got a great production team. Everything's on hold right now because there's a writer's strike.
Right. Yeah. So, I saw that.
Perfect timing. But baby steps with all film and TV. But yeah, super great. He optioned it from the proposal stage, which was really amazing.
Oh, yeah. So walk me through that process when you're writing books for all these other people. Oh my gosh, we didn't even talk about your book being chosen by Oprah for her book club. Crazy amazing.
Yeah.
You had lunch with Oprah and Gail and oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. I don't think I could do that. I think I would just be so fangirled out. I don't know if I could breathe.
Yeah. Well, there's a picture. I think if you watch my TED Talk, I showed the picture where I'm smiling so big. It looks like my head's going to explode. It's like, people talk about ugly crying. It's ugly smiling. Like I'm so, because I'm standing between Oprah and Gail, and Oprah's just told me I'm a great writer. And I'm like, is this my overactive imagination or is this real? And I'm just like,
am I having a flashback?
And like, literally it's like my cheeks are going to fly off my face. But it was just it was amazing. Like we're in this restaurant in New York City and, they're clearing out the restaurant and there's paparazzi outside and the manager's like asking me, well, should we sit you here or there? And I'm like, oh, over there, of course, like Oprah's not going to want her back to the room, like it's jail seating too, and I'm like, no, over here. Like, I don't know, but it was very, it was really, it's like one of those surreal moments. Yeah. Yeah. That, and then the part of my career when we're in India working with the Dalai Lama and we're meditating in his private residence. So I'm like on the floor next to him in his like home, and there's his altar. And I was like, they had a camera crew in there. And so we were meditating and I went to the cameraman after and I was like, did you capture that on camera? Was I by any chance levitating? Because it felt like I was levitating. He was like, no, you were on the ground. I was like, okay, I'm just checking.
Just checking. You're like, that is a serious question.
Yeah. I'm not being funny here.
Being funny. Like, yeah. I can't even imagine. I guess I can imagine, but like, man, once you've had that experience of intense joy like that, was that bliss? Is that joy? Like, what would you call that feeling?
Yeah. I definitely joy.
Yeah.
Bliss seems too mellow of a word to me. It's just like this surreal joy, I guess. But
it's just like shooting rays of joy out your ears and eyes. I was gonna say something else. But
but I think too, like during those experiences, I was still keeping my secret. Right. So I'm meeting all of these amazing authors. I'm working on all these amazing books. I'm getting all these amazing opportunities, but I'm one step removed from it at the same time because I haven't told anyone about my past. And I'm so afraid they're going to find out that I was once called the neighbor from hell in the newspaper, that I was incarcerated woman, that I'm on probation still, that I'm a felon, like all of these things. So I lived in this constant fear. I was afraid the Dalai Lama was going to, see into my soul and be like, oh, wait, she's not supposed to be here. Yeah. Hey, how'd you get in? And so, so it was like, really like, I think my experience of those experiences now would be far different because, shame's so isolating, like Brene Brown says it better, but, like it is that, that once removed because like, I'm not really being fully who I am. I'm keeping people at a distance. It's hard to make new friends because do I tell them my past? Do I not tell them my past? It's just always
when do you say?
When do you
how
say
much
it?
do you say?
Yeah. It's really, really hard. And I was just worried all the time, and when I did finally tell, I don't work, none of the authors I work with are super judgy people, like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, like, so when
crazy.
When I finally,
you helped him write that book about forgiveness.
Yeah,
right?
The Book of Forgiving. Yeah, when I had no idea how to forgive myself at that time,
Oh my gosh, that poem that you
Oh,
included.
Yeah, that's Empa Tutu, his daughter's poem, and
she wrote that.
She wrote that for the book, and it's just so powerful. And I, you know, I emailed her and I was like, hey, you know, in my book, I talk about this poem because it was so impactful to the women in jail when I went back. And can I include it in the book? And she said, of course, blessings, you know, like but she wrote that. I just want to make that super clear. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah, it's clear. I mean, it's so beautiful. Did they, you know, talking about the class that you went back to teach, or, you know, you got their feedback about forgiveness, did they incorporate that into that class? Do you know if it's still ongoing?
So that is interesting. So it was called the Gemma program at the time when I did it. And it was originally started way back, you know, I mean, actually not that far, before me, by women in jail who are like, we're tired of people telling us what program we need. Let us tell you what we need. And so it was created around that. And then it kind of stopped. And then the woman in the book, Cynthia, who went on to become the mayor of Santa Cruz, and she was running the Gemma program. So she and I, we're actually launching next week, have started a nonprofit called the Gemma Project.org. That's the website. It'll be printed in the back of the final book. And so we're bringing that sort of evolved Gemma program like I did to a model site in Northern California. And then we're making the programming replicable across the country. We won't run them, but we're going to like help get that across the country because, you know, all of the data says that women respond to programming. So it's going to be gender responsive care. So we're going to do a in custody day program like I did in the book, and then a reentry services after, and then, you know, help people replicate that program across the country, and then do policy advocacy and change, because the barriers to reentry to I don't know how people talk about recidivism without talking about all the ways we set up people to go back to jail so easily. Like I still have dreams where I'm mistakenly having to go to jail, like to this day.
Oh my God.
I had one like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, you know, like trying to explain, no, I didn't do anything wrong. You know, like that sort of tightrope you have to walk while trying to like also get a job and have stable housing and all of the things. But, you know, get a job, that's a requirement, but make sure it's a job that will let you leave on a moment's notice to go drug test for 3 different agencies across the county when you don't have a car. Like, it is just so bureaucratic and impossible, even with like some support, education, you know, like it's impossible. It's just an impossible system.
I was terrified for you when you got out. And when you started talking about the requirements of how to, you know, drug testing for all these places, you have to have a place to live. You have to be, but you have to, it's like, how do you get a place if you've been a convicted felon? How do you get a job if you've been a convicted felon?
Right.
If you have no car, how are you supposed to go to all these places and test? And none of them are sharing information.
Right.
And oh my gosh, when you got out that first day and someone had reported that you broke probation already, you're like, I just got out. I've been sitting in the offices.
Yeah.
Someone lied,
you know,
and said that you broke probation by
said I was driving by my youngest son's preschool. So not only was it probation violation, it was like a CPS violation. It was like all the things. So I obviously don't know who did that, but I think I know who did that, you know.
I do too.
but I mean, I'd want to think, but
let's
like one, I didn't have a car. Like I wasn't driving by anywhere. Like I didn't have a car. I didn't have a license. You know, my license had gotten I'd gotten a fix-it ticket.
Well, the fix-it ticket terrified me when you had your boys in the car and the Chipotle was getting
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And just how terrifying that whole.
Just going random dinner years after jail, but I'm still on probation because the fines keep adding up, and I get pulled over for a tail light, and you know, 10 police, you know, 6. I'll embellish for the listeners' pleasure, but I think it was like 6 police cars shows up because I'm on probation to search the whole car, you know.
Yeah. And you're like, go ahead and search it. And they freaked out on you. And
and mostly
really
it was just
bad.
Yeah. And you know,
sorry, but I tried to interrupt you, but it was like the abuse of power in that situation. I was like, really, you need a whole bunch of grown ass men intimidating this poor woman and her little kids.
Yeah.
And just holding you and scaring you. It's like
scaring you. And most it was like scaring my
kids.
Hayden mostly, it was like re-traumatizing him, like the last time he had the police all around me, he got taken away, and I was just like, and really we were just trying to celebrate our new home and a dinner, it was Chipotle, it wasn't. And, like, I think saying, yeah, I'm on probation and search my car should have been like, okay, great, get out. It didn't need the big dramatic, the dramatic effects. So,
it's just cruel, the intimidation tactics for no reason. And it just made me, and you had some help, and even if it was reluctant help, you had some help that that those other women don't get. And it really struck me you made friends with one of the guards at the end when you were doing the food service part, and it was like she didn't understand how difficult they make it when you get out.
Right.
Like she had no awareness of how hard they make it.
Yeah.
I thought that was really, it's like, I didn't know how to reconcile that.
It's interesting because it's different departments, right? Corrections is not probation.
Yeah.
Like it's a totally different mindset. I'm sure she knew somewhat, but it was still that black and white.
Zero empathy.
It was still that she was very much a tough love kind of person, like I really do know we would be friends, like she's just like one of those friends who just tells you how it is. So I do think her saying, I don't want to ever see you again was like her way of having empathy, like, but yeah, I had no idea how hard it is. I had no idea how you get out and you think, okay, I committed these crimes. I pled guilty, and I ended up pleading guilty to some things I didn't do to get that plea deal. But like, I'm going to, like, I've paid for my crimes. Like I've done my time. And so now I'm paying for it. And it's like all of the ways in which we don't let people ever pay. I had zero idea about. I had zero idea, even now, like, even, like, if I wanted to homeschool my son, I couldn't because I have a criminal record. Like I literally wrote a book for 2 Stanford professors up there, but I can't homeschool.
The neurosurgeon and
they run the graduate program at Stanford. But I can't, I'm not allowed to homeschool. Like all of your credibility is gone with a criminal record. All of your, I was just reading this article, and I can't remember the state, maybe Oklahoma or something, but there's a warden in a women's prison accused of sexually assaulting the women, taking them to the one place where there's no cameras, right? Which every jail and prison has those places and everybody knows them. But his defense attorney in court said to the court, well, you can't believe these women because they're convicted felons, right? And just that one line in that article, I was like, that's it right there. That's the thing that I had no idea about, is you lose all credibility, right? Like you become the worst version of yourself. You become like who you are, in the worst part of your life is who you are. Like you could say, well, you can't believe a word she says on this podcast. She's a convicted felon, like even if I'm talking about my own life, it's just really interesting to me. I think that's the one thing I had no idea about, like how, and that's why generations pay for one person's crime. That's why I say, like, it's like every sentence, no matter what it is, can be a life sentence, right? Because you're paying for it in so many ways. In so many ways.
So many ways. Yeah, that's hard. It's hard. It's like, how do you move on from that if people are always bringing it up? They never let you literally live it down.
Right. And like who you were before is gone.
Wow. That's
who I was before I was arrested doesn't count. Didn't count when I got out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it takes a lot of time, and people do kind of forget, but I think what you were talking about earlier, about finally owning your story and how freeing that is. It's almost like, it reminds me of, like, I don't know if you ever saw that movie 8 Mile with Eminem. It's like, if you own the very thing that they're going to shame you about, then they can't use it against you.
Right.
And I wonder if, all those experiences, those amazing experiences you had sort of like this wall between you and allowing yourself to receive maybe the maximum experience. I just wonder, what is life going to be like for you? How has it been since you've owned it?
I mean, the first time, it's interesting because I told you what the original title of my book was.
I don't think so.
Oh, so the book was sold in under a different title. And it was part of that, me saying I'm owning my story. And the worst thing that I've lived in fear of people finding out about me is now the title of my book. So the original title of the book, what it was sold under, and probably what the TV show is going to be called, was the original title of the book was The Neighbor from Hell and Other People I Have Been.
Oh, that is so
So the TV series right now is still called Neighbor from Hell. Like that's our working title for the TV series. That
is so good.
But for me, that was like, and my oldest son, when the book sold and I told the title, he was like, "Oh, Mom, I don't know about that." But it was, here's the thing, I've lived in fear for 10 years of people Googling me and seeing that at the time of my sentencing, you know, in the headline of the newspaper said "Neighbor from Hell sentence." Like, and I was like, I'm the nicest neighbor, but like you know, like that's thing in my picture, you know. And my son, my youngest of my older boys, was in junior high, like, and that paper was in every classroom that day. You know, so it wasn't just me getting publicly humiliated and shamed for my lowest point, but like my children, you know, like teenagers and, you know, 12-year-olds. And so, so to me, it was like, yeah, I'm going to call my book that, like, this thing that I've been so afraid of people finding out. But you know, sales and marketing, we changed. I think this is the right title, but so I made it a chapter title. There's a chapter called Neighbor from Hell. But I think, you know, the minute I went on, I did a TEDx talk, you know, and outed myself and said, here's the thing that I'm so afraid people finding out. It was like physically a weight lifted off me. You know, it was just like, oh, okay. Because, you know, what I found out, it was like, no one was judging me as much as I judged myself. No one was as unforgiving of me as I was of myself. No one was, I mean, some people were judging me and still do, but I was the hardest on myself. And so once I really did the work of healing that and sort of having compassion for the choices I made and why I made them, and just like, again, it's just owning your story. Like, it used to be where someone's like, when I was working on the book, even after the book sold and I was on a plane going off to write the book, and someone's like, "Oh, you're going off to write a book. What's the book about?" And I still have this moment like, "Oh, you know, you're stuck on a plane next to me. So do I tell you?" You know, like, and that's still shame. I just told them, but it took a long time where I can be like, "Yeah, I went to jail. Like, yeah, I pled guilty to 32 felonies, you know." And I'm like, Charles Manson has 7. Like, but hey, hi. But which is ridiculous also, but
I know, you're like this sweet little blonde thing.
Like, hi, want cookies? So I think, you know, it's just like, there's still moments like there's just like shame is so sticky, you know. So I would say I'm 95% fine, but like I have a new author I signed to my literary agency, and she's like, "Well, can I read your book?" And so I let her read an early copy of the book. And I found myself wanting to go, "Oh, wait, do you still want me to be your agent now that you've read this?" You know, like I didn't say it out loud, but it flashed in my mind. Like, oh no, you know, this high-powered woman at the top of her field, like, oh, you know, like.
Oh, is it that young CEO that's on your website? That girl? That woman?
No, she's not on. She's about to go on the website I'm talking about. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, you got some amazing people that you're representing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're doing such amazing work.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I just feel like I was trying to put myself in your shoes, and I was like, what a huge weight that must have been to have lifted off. Like, the one thing that was standing between, like, you know, you being your authentic self and others is now gone.
Yeah.
Right. It's like that whole, you know, as we become our authentic self, it's not we're trying to be our best future self. It's more like we're releasing and letting go of things, ideas about who we are that no longer serve us. It's more of an emerging.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So your true self has emerged.
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful and amazing.
Thank you.
and will help. These experiences make us uniquely qualified to reach those that are unreachable sometimes.
Yeah. It's been really, I think, as we're getting closer, as the book's getting ready to come out, obviously we're recording this a little bit before it comes out, but that like getting notes from early reviewers or just people like resonating with stuff is just, it's healing too, because I was like, oh my God, because I was like, I'm only going to do this book if I'm going to be really honest. So I was like really honest in this book.
You were very honest.
I was a little honest. So and my kids I had to have my kids read the book before.
Okay, they read it.
Yeah.
One of your boys as a writer too, right?
Yeah. My son Ty's an amazing writer. And
I have a son
but
named
Kate,
Ty.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. My youngest.
Yeah. And so, my son Caden, obviously like this, letting him read it, I waited till right before I went to production also, like, and he just, senior in high school. And so
he just graduated, right?
Yeah. He just graduated. And so I let him, read it. Cause obviously if there's anything that he didn't want me to share in there,
you'd take it out.
I would take it out. And so he read it in 6 hours. It's like, I've never read a book without stopping. Right. Like he just locked, and I kept going in his room and then he locked me out.
He's all, stop interrupting.
He's like, I'll talk to you about it in the morning. Just, and it was like, I couldn't sleep that night at midnight. And then at midnight, I was just worried, and at midnight he texts me, he goes, oh, there's a big problem at the end of the book. And I was like, what? And he goes, I found a typo. And I was like, it hasn't even got to copy it. Like, so he came in the morning and he's like, okay, I'm ready to talk about it. And I was like, okay. And he was like, well, I didn't know any of that.
Oh, he didn't know because he had a child's perspective.
Yeah.
Oh,
and I was
gosh.
like, I know. And then he was like, there were a few parts that were boring. And I was like, really? What? He goes, the parts I wasn't in, like just total. And then he's like, are you going to pay me for the typo? Like he's a teenage boy, like he was totally fine. He was fine. And they talked to his dad, because obviously I was also very honest about that. But he handled it really well. But, I think it was the right time in my life to share the story also, because he was older, because he's a big part of that story. And I was emerging, right? Like the right time, and and the right time in our family too. Because even with the TV series, I had to text my boys. I was like, are you okay with this? They want to make it a series, and they were like, yeah, sure. They start arguing.
Can we pick who plays us?
Yeah, they were literally have a group chat. They're like, which Helmsworth brother plays us? And I was like, it's you guys as little kids. Like, come on, that's how they are. Like my children had a big foundation of me absolutely loving and being there for them, even in my struggles. And I think, I wish that my messiness and struggles weren't part of their journey and their story, and like the reason why they're resilient. But it is, but my days of like, it's just, it is what it is. Like, it's my journey, it's their journey, and everybody's okay.
Everybody's okay.
Everybody's just okay.
Better than
Everybody's
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all good. Oh my gosh. Well, listen, I could talk to you all day.
Oh yeah.
You have so many I'm so glad I got to interview you early in the process, because I know you're going on the junket. So you're going to be
doing a junket, going on an old-fashioned book tour.
So fun.
Around the country. Yeah.
Are you going to be in Idaho by any chance?
That's not on the list yet, but I'll see what I can do.
I'll see if I can get what do they call it? Like I'll find a bookstore where you can come do a reading.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah.
See if I can sell tickets.
I'm going back to my hometown of Boston and New York City and DC and California and
all the big cities.
Yeah, and Idaho and Boise.
Yeah, Boise. That'd be amazing. I'm gonna have to go to New York, because I think that would be fun. Go to New York one.
It's gonna be really fun in New York.
Well, I'm gonna put all of obviously everyone's got to get the book. I mean, no offense to all the other authors that I've had on my podcast, but I'm going to just say that this is my favorite memoir that I've read. I've done like 300 interviews. But I just read this cover to cover. I could not put it down. It was riveting, and just written so poetically. I mean, you really have a gift for turning a phrase, which is probably why you've been on the New York Times bestseller list 4 times, for heaven's sakes. But I'll look forward to the TV series, and thank you for sharing about the gemmaproject.org. Was there
Yes.
anything else? What is your author's website?
It's just laraloveharden.com. Probably should update that. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll just leave links to all the things
Okay,
in the show
awesome.
notes, and I just can't wait. I'm so grateful for this early copy. I feel so
Well,
special.
Thank
But
you for reading and inviting me on
yes,
and getting this introvert to act extroverted for an hour,
I totally get it. Well, I feel like we would have been buddies at meetings if
Yeah,
I
for
was
sure.
back in the day.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations on all your success, and I look
Thank
forward
you.
to talking to you again.
Awesome. Thank you.